Captain, we have them. We've established Transporter Lock, the Star Trek podcast. Join Ken and crew each week as they explore strange new episodes, seek out new plots and new characters, and boldly go where no podcast has gone before.
Hello and welcome to Transporter Lock episode number 157 for Saturday, January 31st, 2026. I'm your co-host, Chief Engineer Ken Gagney, and guess who's joining me?
Cadet Staci Lee, I'm back again.
Hello, Cadet Staci, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to talk about these next couple of episodes.
Yeah, I'm excited to continue the momentum we built last week talking about Starfleet Academy, which is a brand new Star Trek series just debuted this month. Last time we talked about episodes 1 and 2. This time we're talking about episodes, you guessed it, 3 and 4.
Let's do it.
All right. We don't have any other Star Trek news, and there's nothing really new that we want to share that we missed from last week. Maybe we'll come up with some tidbits, but let's go ahead and dive right in. Like you said, we're going to talk about episode 3, Vitus Reflux, and then we're going to talk about episode 4, Vox in Excelso. Nope, I said that wrong because it's Latin, and I didn't take Latin. I took Greek. Vox in Excelso, which I believe means a voice on high. But anyway, let's go ahead and talk about episode 3, Vitus Reflux. This is an episode that was, I think, perhaps more kid-driven than the previous episode. Some of the online comments about the first 2 episodes were that the adults really drove those episodes. And this time we get to see kids being kids playing laser tag.
Yeah, the fact that laser tag is this popular 800 years from now is, I think that as a person who failed every presidential fitness test in high school, my heart just breaks every time I see this. But also being able to see the dynamics of teenagers and what it looks like when they're in competition with each other.
And the competitors in this case are Starfleet Academy versus the War College, which is something I wanted to bring up last week. So that is something I overlooked, which is the fact that there is a War College. So this is part of Starfleet, not necessarily part of Earth. And it is probably something that stemmed from the burn when all these alliances fractured. A lot of people, a lot of races, a lot of communities and cultures became scavengers because they had to get by with whatever they could find. Mm-hmm. And so they created this war college. We don't know too much more about the history of it. And it's kind of disturbing to me because Starfleet has always been about exploration and diplomacy.
I do think that the war college has this autocratic sort of, we can't trust other people sort of skepticism that is built in. And for me, I saw that with the students. The students are very pessimistic. They are very much focused on winning versus it was like who wins in combat versus who grows the most in a school. So that was a big difference that I noticed, at least from the very beginning. So is it historically Department of War, or was it Department of like library studies and then turned into Department of War?
Yes, because those librarians, you do not want to cross them.
Hey, I know plenty of librarians, and you are very correct.
See? Oh, I've had librarians on this podcast. I know of what I speak.
Yes, you do.
So the War College must have relocated because they are on the USS Athena, which is where Starfleet Academy is. So either the War College was somewhere else and they moved on to the Athena, or the Athena was always a war school and they've expanded it to include this new first class of Starfleet Academy.
Well, I think that, this is based in San Francisco. So I don't think it's necessarily on the USS Athena. I think it's the War College happens to also be in San Francisco at this time, but I might be incorrect.
The thing is, though, that Earth left the Federation. When the burn happened, Earth withdrew from the Federation. So the War College was part of the Federation. So it could not have been on Earth. So where has the Department of War... Oh, there I go again. Where has the War College been all this time, and why is it now sharing space with Starfleet Academy?
Yeah, and I mean, that's a really good question. And I'd like to see more about what that, not necessarily alliance, but understanding comes from with the War College and Starfleet. And as we kind of notice at the end of this episode, it seems like the War College and Starfleet are not consistently in each other's company. It seems more like we're here for a certain amount of time, and this is the experience when we're living near each other. But the campuses, I'm not really sure, like the officers that come from the War College, how do they differ from officers that come from Starfleet?
They seem to use the same basketball court, at least.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and shout out to WNBA. So follow women's sports, everybody.
So there apparently is still a need for the War College, even though the burn is in the past. People have dilithium now. And the students at the War College initiated this war, unsurprisingly, with Starfleet. They were pranking those kids by beaming them from one place to the other. And it astounds me that they were just not immediately expelled for their misbehavior.
Right. Yeah, I was very surprised as well. Also, come to find out, like when they said, "Why are you doing this?" Starfleet, the students were asking, why War College students, like, why? What's the impetus to this? And the War College students were pretty much like, "Because we can." And to me, that signifies not only that kind of ego-driven arrogance, but also the shallow thought, like because you're in a school, like you couldn't figure out a more clever comeback to that. So it to me, it sort of signified that I'm suspecting that a lot of what the War College students learn is more transactional, like you learn to pass the test, for example, and not necessarily invoke deeper thought. But that's just me.
I mean, they seem to be, there was a TV show called Vanishing Sun, and the main character in that made a distinction between a soldier and a warrior. A soldier does what they're told, a warrior seeks justice. And it seems like what you're saying is these kids are just being taught to be soldiers.
Yeah. And that's the impression that I got, was they're just worker ants.
It almost sounds like they're also being raised to be bullies.
Yes, and come to find out, later on in the episode, like where does that support come from? So being able to see, not only are they not getting expelled, but they're actually being encouraged to do this.
Yeah, some of the things that they do, they can only do with access from their school's chancellor or whatever his title is.
Mm-hmm. The tea snob. Yeah, the guy with the tea fetish.
Yes,
that guy.
That's right. A lot of the episode is about them playing a game called Calico. Was that the name of it? Calica. Sorry, I guess I got an autocorrect here into a kind of a cat.
Yeah. I love calicos. Don't get me.
And this is basically, at first they called it like an obstacle course, but it's really more like laser tag or like the X-Men Danger Room, if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, that does seem reminiscent of that, where it's the part of it is possibly holographic, part of it is it's all contained. But I do like the because Sam being one of my favorite characters, I do like how she's permeable, not porous. She makes that distinction when it comes to her ability to just get shot and it goes right through her. So she can kind of pick and choose when she is permeable in her statement. So I like that we kind of learn this little bit about her.
And there was an episode of Star Trek Voyager that I showed you where the doctor was creating holographic lungs for Neelix, and Tom Paris said, "How is that possible? Lungs don't have any matter." And the doctor responds by just slapping Tom Paris.
That was awesome.
And then Tom Paris can't slap him back because he's a hologram and his hand just goes right through.
Right.
So he's selectively permeable. And also Sam can change her appearance to look like anything she wants. So she's basically a changeling.
Yeah, and I think that will. I'm really curious about how that will serve her and the rest of Starfleet Academy in future challenges that they'll face.
Well, I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler, but next week's episode is all about her.
Well, I mean, I didn't know that, but having half of a podcast episode between yourself and me and just talking about Sam, I'm totally here for it.
Excellent. Well, I hope so, because you're the co-host.
Oh, well, yeah, there is that.
Where else would you be?
I'm committed.
I'm just gonna be talking to myself. When Caleb shows up to play in this game, Laura makes the observation, Lone Wolf came to play because he's been on his own, living as a thief and a scoundrel for decades, and he knows how to play. And he actually takes out one of the drones. He grabs onto it, brings it down to the ground, and punches it out, and he gets disqualified, which I thought he was meeting the scenario with the amount of force that it was sending his way. So I thought that was commensurate.
Yeah, I disagree with that because I think that the drones were supposed to simulate an attack, a sky attack. So taking out one of the drones is not necessarily taking out one of the imaginary ships that is shooting down to the ground. But I mean, maybe it's like punching out a teacher and like instead of imagining that it's what it would look like in real combat, which wouldn't necessarily include drones.
It depends on what they were simulating. Like if they were simulating a starship in orbit shooting down at the planet, students would never have a chance. They would just be vaporized.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And is the very minuscule amount of knowledge that I have about the Star Trek ammunition, I would very much agree with that.
Yeah. So if they were simulating like aerial drones, well, that is what they were. So there's no real simulation. It's just them. That's what they were being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's fair.
So they were playing this game and the rules were a little confusing to me. I mean, okay, you need to get to the opponent's end zone and shoot this target that a mascot is dancing under. Like the mascot is supposed to be the last line of defense, but they don't seem to be very effective at their job.
No, but I mean they're fun. So I don't know who it makes me kind of wonder if the person who wrote that part of this of the story was a mascot in high school. Like, we need our day, people, like just have it for the mascot. But the fact that there's this such a serious game that is simulating a life and death situation and have these ridiculous mascots at the end kind of representing the goal. I find that as it provides levity to the episode that otherwise would just be a very serious episode. And there's also a few other things that provide the kind of levity or at least lightheartedness that I really enjoy that help with this episode as well. Because, between Calica, what happens with Caleb getting disqualified, he's a lone wolf, what happens with the other players like Darum, which I'm sure we'll get to. It does get really serious really quickly.
Well, let's talk about Darum. What about him stood out to you this episode?
He redeemed himself a little bit in the first episode. He was a bully, but he saved the ship. Okay, that's great. Thanks. But then he does this like wormy sort of taking sensitive information that Genesis told him and then using it against her because he wants to win. And that's just dirty. Like that's not what trust is about. And trust being, in my mind, one of the underlying themes and words throughout this series so far. Building trust, losing trust, don't trust Starfleet, trust me when, Caleb's mom's saying that. And also Captain Ake encouraging Caleb to trust her. And so there's this trust all around. And then you see that trust being violated by Darum to Genesis. The ramifications of that eroded trust I think is something that we're experiencing.
Especially since he was trying to be captain and he wants people to trust him because isn't that what a captain should do is have the trust of his teammates? And he attains that position by violating their trust.
Yeah, I just don't think that he knows how to play as part of a team. If for somebody who wants to be a captain, all that this episode showed me was that he would do he would blow himself out of the water very quickly on, as he did in this episode, by being the captain. Like, he does not have he has the drive and the desire to be captain, but not the dedication and the compassion that is needed for a captain. And I mean, I know that you and we have lots of conversations about, especially in my discipline, like what makes a leader versus a manager, or what makes, in this case, what makes a captain versus just someone who gets everybody disqualified all the time.
Yeah, he sort of strikes me as the type like Reggie from the Archie comics. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Not so much. I mean, I know that we mentioned Riverdale before, but it's been a long time since I remember reading the Archie comics in my grandmother's basement that was like dated from the 60s. But I was 8, I don't remember a lot of that. So tell us more about Reggie.
Well, Reggie was very upper class. He and Veronica were the rich kids on campus. And he was a real jerk. He was always trying to undermine Archie, but at the same time, he was the kind of guy who felt like nobody else was allowed to undermine Archie, and I'll defend him to the death. And I kind of see Darren in this show being a little bit like that, where he is part of the team, but he wants to be the best part of the team.
Yeah, and I could see that. And I mean, just disclaimer, this is why I hate team sports. Playing volleyball in middle school, like the captain just not necessarily in that case, but in this case with Darren, like really just he's not concerned with anybody else's welfare except for his own. And but I do see, as you talked about with him and Veronica, Reggie and Veronica being of the, kind of upper crust of the financial capabilities in the school, having like, there's a downside to that. There's a darker side that we learn about Darren, being raised in that kind of family later on. And so it does, to me, make sense why I can see why a teenager would try to get to these accomplishments to prove himself in one way or another, regardless of whether he independently wants it or not.
Even when he was playing Calica, he kept saying, stick to the plan. I'm the only point of aggression. I'm the one moving forward. I'm the one on offense. And when that plan continuously failed, he didn't change the plan because he wanted to be the center of attention. He wanted to be the hero. He being the one to capture the flag was more important than if the flag got captured at all.
Right. And you're talking about when they do have that nighttime competition with the war college.
Right.
Not just during the practice round. Yeah.
When Genesis sort of takes over because he has been tapped out, which, by the way, really cool effect that you shoot somebody with a gun and it beams them somewhere else. I love transporter guns. Those are cool.
So, well, you saw that when Caleb showed up, and Laura said, "Oh, Lone Wolf has finally decided to come," and he was late, so that's what she did in retaliation. Was she shot him and made him go somewhere else?
Yep.
She was like, "Don't be late again."
Yeah, she was demoing how the guns work.
Yeah, that's that. Oh, yeah, that's exactly what that was.
Yeah. So when Darren is out of play because he's been tapped out, Genesis has to step in. Somebody has to be captain.
Right.
And when he realizes that her plan actually works, initially he does not support the plan, even though it works. He just doesn't want to be a part of a team that he's not the captain of, and he walks out.
Yeah. And, I think the really telling spot on this was the time where you could see what was the motivation behind Darum was to win as captain. The motivation behind Genesis was for the team to win.
Right.
It's very different.
He kind of reminds me of Tahani in the sense that whatever Darum does, it's never. It's like, let me fix that again.
Mhm.
He kind of reminds me of Tahani from The Good Place in the sense that whatever Darum does is not good enough for his parents. He has to be absolutely flawless, absolutely perfect, can't miss a single note in a recital, or else his
Mhm.
parents will just abandon him and walk away. And that's the standard he now thinks everybody holds him to. It's the standard he holds himself to. And that's
Mhm.
exhausting and debilitating.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that level of perfectionism that is expected from the people who you were supposed to trust the most, who's supposed to raise you, and the level that the expectations get internalized. I really felt for Darum with that. Um, I've been in similar situations, and that unattainable, like it's it's so unattainable that it leads to burnout. It leads to burnout at work. It leads to burnout with families, and is self-destructive, really, at the
Mm-hmm.
end.
And he seems to slowly be learning that. He goes to Reno for some advice, and she says, any message that you're chasing is not worth reading.
Yeah. Oh, Reno. I love it. And yeah, I mean, very wise words. And it goes back to the um, Tig said Reno said something as well um, that I thought was really profound. And she said, people are simple. Either they show up for you or they don't.
Mm-hmm.
That really was impactful for me. What also was impactful for me was that Tig called Laura kitten. Hello. Oh my goodness. I'm loving this. This whole like, oh, Reno and Laura are together. And she's like, okay, my love, I'm just dispensing wisdom. And just the banter between the two and the Klingon French fusion cuisine that they're trying to get in the replicator. I I'm 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 totally here for it.
I think we now understand. I think we better understand now why Jet left the Discovery crew because she said, like, I left a starship on the edge of forever or whatever in order to be here with her. And oh, that makes sense. Like, why would somebody from 1,000 years in the past on this spaceship with her crew leave to go teach somewhere? And maybe I'm not saying she was motivated purely by love. Obviously, she enjoys teaching as well, but
Mhm.
things are starting to click.
Yeah, and you and I both have had experiences, I'm sure, where the relationships it, there's a certain there's a big difference between sacrificing your life to be with somebody else and having somebody else's presence in your life enhancing.
Yay.
Yeah.
So, with help from Chancellor Ake, they figure out how to get back at the War College. They create a fake eyeball and they sneak in and turn off the force fields and they plant these empathy flowers everywhere that grow super big and they can't be removed because they're an endangered species or something.
Yeah, they look like Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors, but they sound like um, the alien that played the equivalent of the parrot on Treasure Planet, where he would mimic back what people would say, and it made me think of Treasure Planet, which I haven't seen in a long time, and I really enjoyed.
And which I've never seen at all.
Well, we're gonna have to put it on the list.
I'm okay with that. Add it to the list. So I think
Yeah.
that overall, this episode at first for me was not as exciting as the first two episodes of the season because I felt like the first two episodes we were getting to learn more about the future and about the fate of the Federation and Starfleet and the larger context in which these kids operated. And this episode seemed small by comparison. Like we see Caleb flirting with Tarima, the Beta Z
Yeah.
princess,
Hmm.
and that was kind of cute. We see her little neck thing blip some more, but in general, like Admiral Vance wasn't here.
Mm-mm.
There was no negotiations with other alien races, which we'll get into that in the next episode about why that probably makes sense that it's not happening in every episode. But I think the more I think about this episode, the more I like it. But when I first saw it, I'm like, I really just don't want a petty drama about kids with big egos trying to beat each other at silly games that don't matter. That was my initial impression. What about you?
My initial impression at the beginning was, oh, this is just going to be kind of a goofy, but also like serious, but also a little shallow of a story plot. By the end, though, and I'm realizing that with every episode, we get to see what the nuanced personality is, or Genesis having issues with her father and being able to look at Darum and see sort of some of the motivation, not to give an excuse, but some of the motivation behind why he has this drive, but in such a short-sighted way that it becomes self-sabotaging.
Mm-hmm.
Then also the relationships of the crew that transcend just the curriculums that they're teaching.
I do like what we learned about the characters in this episode. I just would rather learn about it in a different way.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they could have picked a better environment to display these kinds of interactions.
Although, if I am wanting to learn more about the future of Earth, the Federation, and Starfleet, what I did learn is that 1,000 years in the future, they still have basketball.
It's a really good game.
Is it?
I mean, as long as I noticed that you didn't have the squeaky shoes that distract me every time I watch a basketball game nowadays. So I'm glad they improved that at least. Little wins.
Took 1,000 years, but at least we got that right.
Oh, thank goodness. Finally.
Shall I move on to the next episode?
Yes.
Great. So as I've mentioned, this is Vox in Excelso, or A Voice on High, as translated from the original Klingon. And we start with debate class being run by the Doctor from Voyager, who, as you and I noted, 1,000 years in the future, he still does not have a name. And also, he is not teaching a medical class. So I guess after 1,000 years, he really has broadened his scope, and he does a lot more than what his name, which is the Doctor, implies. He's teaching debate. And he mentions, I don't know if you picked up on this, but he talked about an episode of Star Trek Voyager where he says he literally debated himself into existence.
Yeah, I remember when we were watching this and seeing your reaction to that. And so I thought that there must have been that must have been the precursor or the prerequisite for him to be able to have this debate class and to be the instructor for it. But yeah, tell me more about this.
Almost every series of Star Trek has a courtroom episode, the most famous one being TNG's The Measure of a Man, where Bruce Maddox wants to disassemble Data to learn how he works and make more of him. And Riker has to argue in favor of that, and Picard has to defend Data's life. A great episode. There was an episode recently on Strange New Worlds where number one had to be defended in a courtroom. The episode the Doctor is talking about was on Voyager, where he had written a book, and he found that people were saying like, holograms can't write books, therefore this is not your intellectual property. And he had to argue in front of Starfleet, I am a creative individual and this is my original work. And the ruling at the end was, if I recall, I haven't seen the episode since it aired about 27 years ago, was the judges deciding we are not ready to issue a ruling on the scope and scale that says that holograms are recognized as sentient beings, but we are willing to say that this is your creative work. And so the Doctor was, he won the small scale of the argument, but he was still disappointed because he's like, I am a creative individual. I am sentient, and they haven't recognized that. I may have gotten my book, but I haven't gotten myself.
Yeah, I think that as surface level as episode 3 was, episode 4 was really deep. And this was kind of a hint to it, a foreshadowing, because it's the big, we're looking at, and if not kind of going away with tackling some of the big existential questions, including, can holograms create their own, do they have their own creative capabilities? And what does that mean when it comes to autonomy and agency?
Which I suspect we'll be learning a lot more next week when the episode focuses on Sam.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
The Doctor also said, with the first link, the chain is forged. The first speech censored, the first thought forbidden, the first freedom denied, chains us all irrevocably. He was quoting Judge Aaron Sati, who is not a character we ever saw on any episode of Star Trek, but he himself was quoted by Picard in a famous TNG episode called The Drumhead. A classic episode, also in a way a courtroom episode that dealt with xenophobia and racism, very relevant to our day and age.
Yeah.
I highly recommend anybody listening to this go back and listen or watch the Drumhead episode of TNG. Maybe that's something you and I will do in the next week. But this means that just in the opening moments of this episode, the Doctor was referencing episodes of TNG and Voyager. And I thought that these were some lovely callbacks. I think it's more than just fan service. It's not just for me sitting on the couch next to you to squeal and be like, Leonardo DiCaprio, I get that reference. You know, even Captain America getting that reference.
Yeah. And like you said, this was a reference that was 27 years ago.
Yes.
And so being able to, this is what I really appreciate about your recall, because you can remember things like that where, it's not as popular. So that to me shows that it's not fan service. It's an homage to these episodes that came in the past.
Although if it's not important and they're quoting it, that almost kind of is fan service because it's for the people who get the reference. If it was important to get the reference, then they would give it more context or they'd refer to something much more popular. Like there was a lot of times in this episode where Caleb was debating specific historical precedents. I don't know which of those were actual things. I don't think any of them, because I didn't recognize any of them. But there was a part of me that wanted to pull up Memory Alpha and be like, what happened in the year 2238 that he's talking about? Or who were these people, like Vulcan versus whatever? So it's possible that those were references that I missed. And it doesn't matter because in the context of the story, you knew you were given everything you needed to know. Unlike in the season premiere when they didn't tell us what the burn was.
Yeah, what's up with that? But with the quotes that Sati made, the references that the Doctor is making about his own his own ability to argue himself into existence, as it were, and then for Picard, it's not necessarily, in my mind, I don't necessarily see it as fan service as opposed to it's that important to the continuation of the story that it bears repeating. Because, I don't remember a lot of TNG, never watched Voyager, but I saw those as important pieces of information to know.
So we also see Jaden get up to debate, and he is just overwhelmed. Oh, since you and I are on Zoom right now, I can see you're having a reaction to the memory of how much he was sweating.
Oh, the vapors. Yeah, my heart went out to Krog so much for that because I know what that's like. The fact that he said how he described it is that he has issues stating his point of view. And I thought that was very particular. That was a very particular way to describe the reaction that he was getting. He wasn't intimidated by other people. He wasn't feeling claustrophobic. It was stating his point of view. And so for me, what I got from that was that he had tried to state his point of view in the past and gotten shut down. and gotten punished for it, which we, find out later on is a little bit true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Caleb tries to come to his rescue and they end up having lunch together. He even replicates some food for him, which was very thoughtful.
Even though Jaden won't eat it because it didn't die in a fair fight.
And he's not yet a warrior and he can't have entrail stew.
Yeah. But the pepperoni is
the
what I'm talking
pepperoni.
about.
That's true. That's right. But here's where we get the first clue that something cataclysmic has happened that we were not privy to in the last 1,000 years. When Caleb says Kronos would have been something to see, and he's speaking in the past tense. I found that very worrisome because the planet of Romulus does not exist. Right. This is something that was established in the Star Trek 2009 movie, and which became canon in the TV series, and which led to the unification of the Vulcan and Romulan races. But now we find out that another pillar of the Star Trek universe, the Klingons, have also lost their homeworld because when the burn happened, it wasn't just dilithium in starships out in space. It was dilithium that for some reason was planet side as well. It just exploded across the surface of Kronos and basically left the Klingon race homeless.
Yeah, and the location that the triad, so Jaden, his two dads, his mom, and then come to find out he had a brother, and they're alone. You don't see them in a community. So seeing that what they kind of scattered, the remaining Klingons kind of scattered, and we find out that there's 8 remaining houses of the Klingons, and after the burn, they refused help from the Federation, and that's part of this conflict that's going on right now. But it felt, to me, it was very, I could see where the feeling of loneliness and isolation could have become really at the forefront with his family, with Jaden's family.
Yeah, it's a very different, in some ways, very different Klingon culture than we're familiar with. With their, as you said, being only 8 houses, they essentially have a nomadic lifestyle to the point where Starfleet says that they are an endangered species that will die out if they continue their ways, if they do not adopt a homeworld, a stable environment where multiple Klingons can exist and procreate. I don't remember having ever seen what Jaden referred to as a triad house. As you said, he has mother and fathers. Although we really, if I recall, only saw one of the fathers playing a significant speaking role in this episode.
Yeah, we saw both of them. The one was the one that gave him the weapon to try to convince him to become a warrior according to that father's perspective. So that's a big caveat that I want to put on that.
We also see a lot of similarities between Jaden and his classmate Caleb. And Caleb tries to draw some comparisons that Jaden rejects, but Caleb lost his mother, but never really had a people. And we saw that at the end of the last episode when he put on his calico coat and he's learning what it means to be a part of a team for the first time. And Jaden had that and lost it.
Yeah. And I think, I know that this is where it kind of reminds me of a Hallmark movie, like where they just pull out all the stops and they get really personal and they dig really deep, and these kind of cheap shots, like Jaden saying, "We are not brothers," and Caleb being like, "Well, that's kind of not what I'm wanting to say here," and just leaving in a huff in either way. Having raised a kid for a few years, like I get that, like some things just get kind of spouted out, but also I just felt like that was a little unnecessary and extreme.
On whose part?
That's a good question. I think on both, because the way that Caleb reacted later on when he just was really trying to stick it to Jaden in the debate ring, but at the time it felt a lot more shallow. But learning more about Tar, his brother, the relationship that they had, and what led up to Jaden becoming a part of Starfleet Academy, I could see some unhealed wounds there.
Yeah, his relationship with his brother was really insightful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the experience of coming out as a gay man because I'm not a gay man, but I've heard stories about people who they have come out to their parents and their parents are like, we've known this about you forever and we've always loved you. We've just been waiting for you to share it with us.
Yeah.
And in this case, where Jaden says, my brother knew my soul before I did, I saw some parallels there. I certainly don't mean to speak for a community I'm not a part of, but just the idea that Jaden was growing up in this culture and in this family where certain things were expected of him, specifically that he'd be a warrior. And his brother, that wasn't a struggle for him. Like Jaden was struggling to be like, who am I? What am I supposed to be? And his brother could see the reason you're struggling, Jaden, is because you're not a warrior. And I accept this about you, and I want to help you accept it about you too.
Right. Yeah. And as a member of the queer community, I've had that experience where it's been the opposite, not to the extreme. I've seen that with other people where their parents disown them. And, that was a risk in my family. But when it became more safe for myself to come out as queer, for siblings that I've had that have come out as queer, for friends, and to I'd like to think that my reaction to loved ones of mine coming out as queer has been that similar to Jaden and Tar. You know, I remember a specific conversation with someone who was in my family, and it was the asking for a friend sort of mentality or perspective, and saying, I love that person. There's no even if, there's no regardless, there's no anything, there's no contingency to it. I love that person. And so having that level of acceptance, Jaden having that level of acceptance in the way that he wanted to serve as a healer, not as a, in this term, as a warrior or as a killer. The level of love that was unrestricted by what he wanted to do in his life from his brother, I think it was really beautiful to see.
Especially when his brother came back with that stab wound and Jaden wanted to save him and he couldn't. And even if they had had the technology, if they'd had the dermal regenerator, it sounds like the father said, Starfleet technology has no place here. And that, for me, reminded me of COVID deniers,
Mm.
where there are people who have died of COVID because they were not vaccinated and their loved ones, they acknowledge that their loved one died, but they'll say it wasn't COVID. They'll come up with some other explanation to be like, the doctors just say he died of COVID because they want people to get vaccinated. It wasn't COVID, it was something else.
Well, I actually worked on a team where one of the team members, this was right when, we were sheltering in place, and someone that I knew refused to get vaccinated, and they did die. And it's very sad, to refuse that help. Um, and not to go off of that subject too much, but what this reminded me of with that dermal regenerator was actually back in the first episode when Laura gets is it shot?
Impaled.
She gets impaled. There we go. And it's up to Jaden to use that the medical equipment on her. And she looks at him and she said, whatever shame that you have, you need to set that aside. And I thought that was, not awesome that shame is such a big thing 800 years from now. would think that, like I'm a little disappointed that it hasn't that it still comes up quite so easily. But when I saw the dermal regenerator and tar, the first thing I thought of was, oh, this explains why he was so nervous and why he was like, don't kill your cadet master on the first day. And when she said about the shame, that was something that I was really intrigued about to learn more.
There's probably a part of him that's now wondering, how come I could save my teacher but not my brother?
I wouldn't doubt that he thought that the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
It was that if only I could, because you saw where Jaden said, I'm going back to the trading post to get that. So he knew where it was. He knew how to get it. And the fathers stopped him. The one that really, like, by the end of this episode, I was crying because of the interaction of Laura coming to Jaden and reframing that last day. I need a minute because the feeling of abandonment is so pervasive, and to someone, and I'm just speaking of my own experience with that seeing that abandonment in a new way, as Laura described it, as a freedom. It was really, really impactful. And the juxtaposition of Jaden's point of view, where he says that he has difficulty expressing his point of view, he's got this shame, and the reasoning why he has this shame and being left behind, feeling that left behind, and Laura coming in and saying, you weren't left behind, you were set free. And the end result was still the same. He was left alone on a planet all by himself, but he eventually made his way to Starfleet. It's like, on one hand, the Klingon cultural way of doing these things, I can respect that. But on the other hand, like, they couldn't have picked a better way to tell him that that's what they were doing. So it was still really upsetting.
Do you think Laura lied to him to make him feel better?
I never considered that, because I don't see Laura as being anything but brutally honest. To the point where it's like, I mean, we've all met those people where they're like, I'm just being honest. And it's like, no, you're just being like, I see Laura as having that capability. And I don't think that she would have sought him out specifically to sit him down and say, I regret not coming to you earlier as an elder to describe this. I think that to me was a level of vulnerability with Laura that I wasn't expecting. I mean, other than when Reno called her kitten, like that, like Reno calling her kitten was the pinnacle. And then Laura admitting that she had regrets about not going to Jaden earlier in the debate. Like that was the next step down for me when it came to big impact.
Not just earlier in the debate, but earlier in the semester, because he's the only Klingon cadet, and she is the only other even part Klingon there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she describes herself as being, her mom is Klingon, and her dad was freed, Jem Hadar, and so there's so many parallels that I see about this particular episode, and as you said at the beginning, the xenophobia and the racism and the bloodline history of the US being built on the backs of people who we debated for so long on whether or not they were actually people.
How does this tie into this episode?
So when Jaden was at the debate, when he got his resolve back after he talked with Laura, and he said, put me back, bring me back to that podium. And he talked about being defining him, Klingons being able to define themselves and being able to say, like, let us say who we are, as opposed to the Federation saying who they are. It's kind of like the philosophical question, like, what makes a car a car? And I saw his resolve as being like, we're a dying race, but the Federation is coming in with the perspective that we need help, and that we're kind of the eight houses are kind of like this helpless, fighting, sort of belligerent culture. And he was quick to point out that, like, being able to have the independence and the agency to define who they are was really poignant.
Are you saying that Starfleet was being racist and xenophobic?
I don't know if I would go that far, but they certainly, it wasn't until Jaden pointed out, like, if you were to listen to Klingons, you would understand that gifting us a planet is not how you talk to Klingons. Klingons communicate through battle. And so I saw it as a blind spot by Starfleet. They didn't try to understand the Klingon culture and didn't try to meet the remaining Klingon people where they, in a way that they didn't meet them where they're at, as opposed to trying to push Starfleet norms and understandings onto Klingons.
With so little opportunity for diplomacy and advocacy during the years after the burn, it's possible that there are very few people left alive who really understand Klingons outside of Klingon culture itself.
Right. But, I didn't see Starfleet seeking out Klingons to discuss that with them. I saw Captain Ake doing that, which there was some drama there with some previous relationship stuff going on. That was fun to watch. But I didn't see Admiral Vance. I saw him having these discussions with Klingons, but not really trying to understand, like, why are they saying no? As opposed to just thinking, well, they're an arrogant race. And that wasn't what the case was, because that's not how Klingons communicate.
But like I said, this is the first time that Vance has probably ever had to negotiate with Klingons. Either they've been light years away and unreachable, or they've been at war. There was even a recent comic book that came out that said, in the years immediately after the burn, when the Earth departed from the Federation, Klingons actually launched an attack on Earth and killed billions of people. Now, I don't know if that's canon because it's a comic book,
Right.
But Earth and Klingons have not had the best relationship in the last 120 years. They may have been allies before that, but nowadays they are literally alien to us.
Yeah, and I mean, Klingons feel the same way about Earth. When they saw the Starfleet tech, they called it, we don't want that alien equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question I have is, when Admiral Vance was trying to propose this planet to the Klingon, what was the purpose of doing that? If Klingons were such a fearful, warful race or culture, and they killed all these billions of people on Earth, why did Starfleet still see them as valuable? That's a question that I have.
I think it's just Starfleet trying to be a good neighbor. And, we see the same thing nowadays on Earth. Some humans are constantly trying to save certain species, whether it's mammals or insects or plants, and not because we might exploit them in the future, but because these things have a right to exist.
Yeah, I agree as well. Like, uh, one note that I had was, should we allow a group of peoples to define themselves, even if it leads to their own extinction? The thought that I had was the Sentinelese, one of the uncontacted peoples, where the one person like tried to leave he was a missionary and then he disappeared and they think that they ate him. And then another person showed up with a Diet Coke, later on. I spent some time in the Amazon and I met an indigenous tribe there. I've shared this story with you, Ken, because it was that was really it was a catalytic moment, because these people had nothing compared to, what American standards are, right? They were wearing dirty clothes and they were obviously hand-me-downs, and people were just clustered, and they had field bandages on instead of like actual medical grade things, but they were so happy. And so what defines a culture, and what defines that culture's identity and agency?
Well, this brings up a question that you had for me while we were watching this show, which is, what is the Prime Directive?
What is the Prime Directive? Yes. What is that?
The Prime Directive is a very good and important law, but it's one that's often violated by Starfleet captains who are stars of TV shows. It basically has two components, I should say. The first is that if an alien race has not achieved warp technology, then we are not to make ourselves known to the inhabitants of that planet. We being the Federation.
Uh-huh.
They should not be aware of us. Like, we can monitor them and study them, but only from a distance. We're not to engage with them. We're not to let them know about the wider world outside their own planet. Anything that would influence how they are developing as a culture and a species.
Okay.
The other aspect of the Prime Directive is, if an alien race has achieved warp technology, we nonetheless cannot interfere with internal affairs. So if, for example, there was an alien race that is not part of the Federation, they have warp technology, and they are engaged in a civil war, we do not take sides.
Okay.
Those are the two main parts of the Prime Directive.
And so how do you see this playing out in this particular episode with Klingons?
Klingons are a warp-capable technology species that has not joined the Federation. Therefore, if they have not asked for our help, we cannot give them our help. We cannot enforce anything on them. If they stray into our space, we can evict them. But otherwise, Klingon culture is their own to decide.
Right. Yeah. Which was the crux of the debate. What should we force Klingons to take this planet? When you were talking about the Prime Directive, I do think allowing a people to have their own agency, but also one thing that, with the archaeology background that I have, that makes such a big difference is, what are we trying to learn versus what are we trying to teach? And I'm really grateful that, I saw this as a very impactful episode, because even Captain Ake, Chancellor Ake, was like, let me hear what Jaden has to say, and actually took his idea, which I felt was genius, used it for Klingons to successfully and honorably go to that planet.
And this is one of the things where you say you don't see Starfleet trying to understand Klingon culture. We didn't really see Starfleet much at all in this episode. And this is one of the things that I both like and need to suspend disbelief about with this whole series, is that in the second episode, these cadets are directly responsible for Beta Z joining the Federation. And in the third episode, no, it's the fourth.
Yeah, fourth.
Yeah, we directly see the cadets being responsible for the Klingons being rehomed. And so these 16-year-olds and 21-year-olds are quite precocious, because they're doing what trained ambassadors cannot. Now, on one hand, this is what I want to see about the future. I want that broader scope. I want to see what's happening, not just on a school campus, but what's happening in the wider world of the Federation and Starfleet. But on the other hand, it's somewhat unrealistic to me that these kids are having so much influence.
Yeah, and that Starfleet isn't able to figure it out otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's what I mean. Like, did anybody ask anyone but Jaden, like, what would be a way to solve this? Is there another option?
Mm-hmm.
And he proposed an option that I really liked the option that he proposed. I saw it as really clever, but also that's one of the lighthearted parts that I saw. Like, okay, let's all just pretend like we're just now noticing that you're invading this space. And okay, shields are up. All right, pew pew. All right, you win. No casualties. We'll just give you this planet. Thanks.
I'm surprised the Klingons went along with that because it was clearly a fake fight for everybody involved, and that doesn't seem like their style.
No, but I do think that is it Odek?
Odell.
Odell, he might have put his walls down a little bit more, and he might have seen this as, we do want to have an opportunity to continue to live, and if playing this game, as it were, is a way for us to maintain a semblance of our honor as we define it, as Klingons define their own honor, and to also fit into the demands of what Starfleet is trying to accomplish, then having a little bit more leeway with that. I could see him sort of loosening his grip.
I did really like that character and the actor who played him. He reminded me of the late William Hurt as well as Jeff Daniels. Under a lot of Klingon makeup, it can be hard to tell exactly who it was. It was David Keeley, who has not been in anything that I've recognized or seen, but I like this actor apparently.
Yeah, he was a really great actor. And he and Holly Hunter, like, I feel like they had some chemistry, maybe even off the camera. So, because the way that they were bantering to each other and how they played up the relationship, the residue of the relationship that apparently had happened so long ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they were having a really great time. The actors were having a really great time.
One thing that the show didn't spend a lot of time clearly communicating, or at least making superficial, was how much of what Jaden was feeling this episode was grief over the possible death of his family, not just his brother, but all three of his parents.
Well, because of the understanding that I believe Jaden had about being abandoned, he had said something earlier in the episode, and he said, I said goodbye to my family a long time ago.
16 months.
Yes, 16 months, which, I mean, he's only, 20? So that's a significant part. Sure, why not, of his life. But being able to say, when he said that, I felt like the fact that his parents were still alive, he saw that as more of a bonus versus an end goal of something that he was hoping for, because I don't think that he expected his parents to have anything to do with his parents ever again.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was one other relationship or interaction that I want to mention, which is with Darum Ramey. When Darum came into Jaden's room and taught him how to breathe and how to speak up.
Yeah, and he called it battle breathing. And I saw that as reminiscent to well, they call it box breathing, but also just the meditation breathing, where you recite a chant over and over again. And I liked how Jaden repeated what Darum was saying in Darum's own language. And so I saw that as this is something that is this type of breathing is something that is it transcends language.
Mm-hmm. In American culture, we don't see a lot of physical intimacy between men, which is something I talked about, especially in season 1 of Picard, how they defied that, much to my delight. In this episode, we saw these two characters getting right up face to face and holding each other's hands.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they were implying anything other than assistance with warrior mentality?
I'm not sure. It was this the closeness of the proximity because of some attraction, physical attraction to one or the other, or was it because Jaden he is so much more of an emotional person, an emotional Klingon, than typically what you find. And we don't know a lot of things about the Kionians, and so maybe that is how close Kionians get together. In other cultures, such as like in modern day Egypt, men often will hold hands when they're walking together. So maybe it's just a cultural thing, or maybe they're both hot, so I could see that. I'm here for that.
It would certainly be narrow-minded of us to assume that everybody on this show is heterosexual.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, like as I said before, I'm queer. I'm liking a lot of people on this, and being able to embrace that is something that I really was looking forward to experiencing with this with Star Trek in general, getting into Star Trek, because I know that the non-mainstream and therefore not conservative in a certain way relationships, the relationships are complicated, and so putting them in different silos that are only heterosexual, or only men can only be in this masculine size personal bubble. These are things that I'm looking forward to seeing more of, and seeing where that leads.
I think we've done a pretty good overview of these 2 episodes. Is there anything else you want to mention?
There was one other thing that I wanted to mention, because I do see a kinship with it. Caleb, at the very end, he said, "I hoard Earth food because my mom and I were going to have it together." And he said he starts to distract himself from thinking of her. And I thought that was really, it's a very brotherly thing to say to Jaden, to admit that. Because at first, Jaden, at the beginning of the episode, Jaden just says, "Oh, are you hoarding Earth food again?" Like, it's just like a passive thing. Like, oh, it's just a quirk. But there's this really deep-rooted reason why Caleb does that. Does it make sense? Is it reasonable? Not necessarily. But can I see the explanation for it a little bit in that? Humans aren't always rational. And we don't do rational things, which always keeps us on our toes, right? So when he said that, I was like, I could see why he would do that. That would be the reason. Yeah.
And it was very self-aware of him to be able to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I don't expect him to be that self-aware for like the next 5 episodes.
He spent all his self-awareness on this one episode.
That's it. He's out of self-awareness points now.
Yeah. So overall, good episode?
Yeah. Yeah, very emotional episode for me. And especially in a big contrast to episode 3, as we discussed earlier.
Yeah, I would say episode 3 was an outlier of the 4 episodes we've seen so far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We needed stuff to blow up. Let's put it in episode 3.
Love it. So, great pair of episodes. As an exercise to the listener, I'll ask them to compare Jaden's solution to the Klingon problem with the Vulcan hello from Discovery, season 1, episode 1. This is far too big a debate for us to get into this episode. But there is 6 more episodes of Starfleet Academy, which means 3 more episodes of Transporter Lock this season. Until next time,
everything is going to be all right.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on iTunes and keep your hailing frequencies open by following us on Twitter @TransporterLock or subscribing to our podcast and email newsletter at transporterlock.com.
Janet Reno. Is that her name? It's not Janet.
I don't think it's Janet Reno.
I think I'm thinking of an attorney general. Hold on. Hold on. Let me fix this.
Yeah.